What's up, everyone? Welcome to another interesting and exciting episode at the English Blog. My name is Adrian.
I'm Christine.
I'm PJ.
I'm Sarah.
We're a blog of English teachers by English teachers and for English teachers. We are the English Blog team.
You are watching Season 2, Episode 8 of the English Blog, where we will be talking about monitoring student understanding effectively. So if you want some different teacher perspectives on how to gauge student understanding in class, then you should watch this episode.
Don't forget that we provide customized plans, curriculum mapping, and unit planning. We also offer life and coaching sessions, and make sure you catch our weekly vlog and blog content that we release related to ESL education. Simply send us a message at www.theenglishblog.com and be sure to subscribe to our website to get exciting offers and updates.
You can find us all over all the social medias. You can find us on Facebook, where we premiere our videos every Friday. That's the English Blog, but the URL is the English Blog for Teachers. You can also find us on Instagram at _English_blog. We're also on LinkedIn as a company, the English Blog. And you can also watch all of these videos on YouTube as the English Vlog with a V. And you can also stalk us on Twitter, handle the English Blog 1. So check us out, like, follow, share on all those platforms, across all those platforms, and wherever you are on social media, we will find you.
And as you guys are watching this video, please remember to like and share it to your network, whether you're watching from your laptop, your tablet, or whatnot. Share. Let's go to the first question. And the first question is, why is it important to check for understanding through the lesson?
So checking for understanding has a lot of purposes. For students, it can make them feel secure. It can make them feel like they know what's going on. It makes them feel safe. Many students, it makes them feel checking for understanding and them being able to do it builds their confidence and makes them feel like they are learning something. And then obviously for you, you need to know if they're understanding what you're saying, whether it's instructions or exam specifics, and then also the actual content of what you're saying. All of that is essential for them to better their English.
Some students may not be proactive enough to ask you questions if they find something confusing or they don't understand something talked about in class. Maybe they will consult with a classmate, or they will never ask any questions. And they may end up figuring out at the end of the day that confusing thing or that problem, but you'll give them a much more efficient learning experience if you know how to check for understanding in class. And there are various ways to do that, which we'll talk about in this episode.
Are there wrong or ineffective ways that teachers check for understanding?
One ineffective way that teachers check for understanding is asking yes/no questions. You want as much as possible to avoid asking close-ended questions because students will likely just nod their head when they don't understand what exactly you're talking about. And you don't want to say, do you understand? Or does this make sense? Because they're just going to say yes. Chances are that's what they're going to do. Instead of saying, do you understand? It would be better to turn it into a negative question. And is there something that you don't understand? And this, in my experience, gives students a bigger feeling of responsibility. And they will be more likely to speak up if there is something in class that is confusing to them or something that they don't understand. And I am all about empowering students and giving them some feeling of independence. And this is a really wonderful way to do that and achieve that in class.
As for me, one bad combination is a terror teacher, like a really strict teacher, and this teacher putting you on the spot. Like, for example, Mr. Pantonyal, do you understand what I just said? And then he or she will follow up with a question that catches me off guard because I wasn't prepared for it. Well, I think the teachers should also start with the intention that they have. The intention really is to check for understanding and not to put anyone on the spot and to put them on hot seat. So maybe if you're going to do that, might as well prepare the students ahead of time, saying that, okay, so tomorrow, guys, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be asking random people about certain questions. You guys better listen. I also feel guilty doing that sometimes, but that's why we have to make sure that intentions are clear so that we begin with the end in mind, that we want to make sure that they understand what we're trying to teach them. What are ways to check for understanding?
So if you're teaching simple vocabulary, there are 3 ways that you can check for understanding. One is a negative check. So a negative check is when you're expecting the wrong type of answer. So you point to your watch and you go, is this a clock? And you want them to say no to show that they can distinguish 2 different objects that tell time. Another way to check for understanding is have them point to the item, the language item that you're discussing. So that's called a demonstration check. So if, for example, you're discussing fruit and you want to make sure they know the difference between a lemon and a lime, you might display a bunch of fruit and then say, point to a lime, and then later on point to a lemon, so that they demonstrate that they understand that piece of vocabulary. And the last one is called a discrimination check. And you know, discrimination check might be something where you have pictures of fruit and they have to match the correct name with that piece of fruit. Okay. And then if you're doing some more complicated lexical items like grammar or adverbs, for tenses, I would use timelines, but in combination with concept check questions. So we often refer to this as CCQ questions, and they're simple questions that you can ask to make sure that the student understands the function of the language without actually using the target language to ask that question, that concept question. So if we go back to the watch and the clock example, some concept check questions might be, can you wear a watch? What about a clock? Can you wear a clock? Where do you see a watch? Where do you see a clock? And so on, to distinguish and clarify the meaning of 2 words that might be similar.
Thanks, PJ. And for me, you can actually gamify your checking for understanding this way. For example, you can give them big bond papers, for example, and then you can give a reward at the end of that lesson. Whoever gets the most answer correct, or maybe you can group them into 2 teams, for example. Whichever team answers correctly, putting their bond paper with their answers correctly, gets a prize for you. That's one. Another one is you can also have them put their hand up if they agree or disagree to the statements that you're going to say in relation to the lesson that you just taught. And then the last idea I could think of is you could also use the Bloom's taxonomy questioning to check for understanding. This is what I mean by that. So for example, in Bloom's taxonomy, in terms of comprehension or understanding, you have keywords like describe, distinguish, explain, interpret, predict, recognize, and summarize. And you can ask questions to check understanding, like what facts or ideas show, or how would you compare, or how would you classify, or can you explain what is happening, for example, in this so and so. So those are just ideas for you to check understanding. When exactly in the lesson should you check for understanding?
So I would say that I think Sarah and I are on the same page that it's essential to check for understanding throughout the lesson. But it's particularly important to check for understanding after you present new vocabulary or a new grammatical structure to your class. So right after the presentation stage, if you're using PPP as your methodology, and you also want to ask another type of question known as the ICQ, okay? And this is the instructional check question. So those come after direction. So you might want to ask questions like, are you going to write now? Are you going to write or talk? Or how long do you have to do this? What do you do after 15 minutes? So really simple questions to make sure that they understand the directions after you give them.
Yeah, like PJ said, you should be checking for understanding throughout your lesson. You should always check your instructions, because if you're giving the feedback you're going to get from your students about whether they understand or not is only as good as your instructions. They might know this concept, but your instructions weren't clear, the task was poorly written, and they don't perform it. And you can't tell if it's a you problem or a them problem. So you need to check your instructions. And also checking questions are important, because for many students, especially at lower levels, that could be the only question they get right all day. And that builds their confidence and makes them feel much better. It's a perfect opportunity for you to give some positive feedback and reinforcement to people who are struggling with the content of your course itself, and make them feel like, wow, here I am. She's asking me a question in English and I'm getting it right, and she's smiling at me. And that is also very powerful beyond just the information that you glean about whether or not they understand. So yeah, you always need to use your ICQs after you give instructions. Like PJ said, in the sequence, make sure that you're checking for understanding after there's a new concept. And in your lesson plan, you should have concept checking activities built in. The types of things that Adrian was talking about last question. You should have these activities. You should have some activities that help them practice, and some activities that ask them to put it into practice, and that you can watch and make sure that they know what they're doing, and that they understand. And then also within your entire course, you should have some more cumulative comprehension to make sure that they can understand lots of different aspects of what you're teaching them, not just this type of sentence alone, but what it does in a paragraph, or the different connotations and meanings of this particular vocabulary word. So yeah, your comprehension checking comes orally through you throughout the lesson, and it should be present in your lesson plan and your entire course plan, the whole long-term deal. It needs to be in all of those places, and if it's not, it breaks down and it becomes hard to determine if your students are actually understanding, or if it's a failure on your part of guiding them to understanding.
What are some signs or clues that your students don't understand the material? So I could think of two signs. One is quiet. On the other extreme is the noise. What I mean by quiet is when they're really eerily quiet, like they're not talking at all. They're not asking questions, and they're just staring at you, either with this kind of stare or something like that. Then the other part of that is the noise, when they're talking to each other. They're not really talking about the lesson, but they're talking about other stuff. That means they not only they not only understand the lesson, but they're not interested maybe in the lesson that you're teaching. So there, how about you, Christine? What do you think? What are some signs or clues that they don't get it?
I think one mistake that teachers often make is that they think that if a student makes a mistake, then they don't understand the material. And in the classroom, I would say it's important to differentiate between mistakes and errors. A mistake is when a student knows how to answer a question or perform a task, but they do it incorrectly because, for example, they lost focus or they got nervous because you asked them in front of the class and put them on the spot. Um, and then an error, on the other hand, is when a student does not know how to answer a question or perform a task, and of course they don't do it correctly. Um, and there are ways to identify errors to know that your students are not understanding the material. You can ask them similar questions, questions similar to the one that they answered incorrectly. Or you can ask them again open-ended questions and not yes/no questions to see how they came about answering that question or performing that task. So I would say those are very effective ways to gauge for understanding. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just because they made a mistake, don't think that they don't understand the material. You should dig a little bit more deeply and see if they are making errors because they don't understand it. And yeah, I think that's very important.
So some more signs too, depending on your students, this is where you really need to build rapport and get to know your students as people, because some of them will lie to you and tell you that they do understand in order to save face in their class. Some of them will redirect. They'll half understand your question and shift it into a question they can answer. They'll just be quiet. Some people have physical tells. They're messing with their hair. They're jiggling their glasses. They're coughing. They're looking over at their friend who's mouthing them some words while your back is turned. So yeah, look for signs of just agitation, anxiousness, and sometimes honestly deceit. You should look for that, and that can tell you. Otherwise, there are students that will 100% shout at you that they do not understand until you make them understand. But not every student is like that. So be on the lookout and get to know your students.
I just really like what Sarah added because I can see myself in some of those situations in the past. It brings back so many funny memories. All right, we're now down to the last question. And the question is, what do you do when a student doesn't really get it?
So I have a I guess 4-step program to this. It's a kind of lengthy answer, so feel free to jump in there. And I think most of what I will say will work if you're in a digital classroom or if you're still in person. You might need to shift it around, but I'll try to address that in this question. So if you've got a student who just doesn't get it, first you need to look at your lesson plan. And you need to make sure that you have multiple ways to present this material. Not everybody is going to learn it in the same way. So if you're only presenting it in one way, they need to understand your spoken instructions, or they need to be able to read and self-study. Then you might have people that just that are not going to learn it that way. So you need to make sure that your lesson plan is solid and that you are introducing and teaching and practicing this concept through a wide variety of methods so that something will click with them and something will stick. If you're early in the lesson, try to reassure them and then try to keep moving to give them more opportunities to practice it. If you're halfway through, then you might need to go to my next phase. So if they're still not getting it, you need to make sure that they really understand your instructions, and you need to eliminate not understanding the task instead of not understanding the content. So in that case, you really need to look at your instructions, make sure that they're clear, make sure they're concise, make sure that other people understood them without issue. Ask your instruction checking questions, and give them in different ways. Use gestures, use diagrams, make sure your instructions are clear so that you can eliminate that, because if that's it, then great. You just give them the right instructions and they're on their way. If they're still having a problem, then try to explain it in a new way yourself, but I only ever do this once, because otherwise it can get kind of a weird dynamic where everybody's hyper-focused on this interaction between you and this one student, and sometimes it can become a lecture, and sometimes you can be, as a teacher, you can become frustrated that they aren't understanding what you're saying, and it just sets up like a cloud of negativity and stress. So I offer one additional explanation outside of whatever my lesson plan already had in it. And then if that doesn't work, I get feedback from the class. You could still do this digitally. You ask other students to explain the concept to them. And usually somebody in there gets it, and sometimes they're able to explain it in a better way, especially for me as a native teacher, because many of these questions and problems understanding I never experienced because I never had to learn English as a second language. So your students can be a great source of insight to their language learning process, and many times your students will know that person better than you, especially if they're children, and they'll already have a relationship, and they can pull things out of that student that you never could. They understand them, and they can motivate them in a better way than you can sometimes, because they have this relationship with them. It also gives a totally fresh perspective. I've had plenty of times where students pop out with the perfect explanation that never entered my mind. And yeah, the more the merrier, and somebody in that room understands. If they don't, it's your instructions, so go back. And then finally, if they're still not getting it, try to reassure them emotionally. Make them feel like this is not a problem. This is a-okay. I have total faith in you. It's going to be fine. Just relax and let's try this activity. And you get them reassured so that they'll move through your lesson plan. They should have like pair checks, if not total pair work, in there. So they should be able to ask for help from their peers, and also like check the answers. Even if they don't understand, just seeing the pattern of somebody who has done it correctly before you go over the answers as a class can really help them too, and can help them sort out what their issue is. So yeah, they should work in groups. This is harder to do online, but you can still do breakout groups and put them in pairs and let them talk to each other, but not everybody else in the class. You don't want this to suck up all of your class time. And then overall, throughout this process, keep a positive attitude and don't add anything to the student's stress and embarrassment. That was a lot. So yeah, PJ?
What she said. We're done. No. Yes, I mean, I think Sarah did cover a lot of things, but also, so you can cheat a little bit. Like if you have a monolingual class and it's an you also have to see like who's not getting it. Is it one student that's not getting it? Is it a small population of students not getting it? Or is it the whole class that doesn't get it? If everybody gets it and one student doesn't get it and you're in a crunch for time, I just do the lazy, easy way and I say, explain in your language what we're doing right now to this one student so he gets it and we can move on. Okay, that's the quick and dirty way to do it. But if you have more time, okay, so then we go to the other end of the spectrum, which is everybody doesn't get it, or majority. If it's 60%, if it's actually no, you know what? If it's 50% or more of the people that don't get it, I will reteach the whole thing again, because in my opinion, is if it's more than 40% of people who don't get it, then the error is somewhere on my side. So, but when I reteach it again, I'm going to get the support of the class of the kids that do know it, so that they continue to be engaged in the lesson, and I will help them. I will use them as leverage to create meaning for the students that don't know. So for the students that do get it, I'll ask them, okay, what's the, like if it's an adjective or an adverb, I'll see if they can demonstrate it in some way through facial expression or mime, or I might say describe a situation. And most of the time this is a great way also to make your students bond together with each other, because they want to help each other, they want to see each other succeed. So you can always leverage the strength of the group when you have a few students that are not getting it. Okay? I also like to do this thing where if they sort of get it but it's not totally clear, and I have a sense of that, I like to do this thing called fist to five. So I tell the class, and I like to do this especially after directions. I say, give me a fist if you don't understand at all what you're going to do. You have no idea, I don't know. They usually know the meaning of I don't know, so they're like, yeah, right? And then if they're like, and I say, okay, let's say you have an idea of what you're doing, but you have questions. And then, so show me a 2 or a 3. So you'll see 2 or 3. And then I say, okay, if you think you know it very well, but not perfect, show me a 4. And if you think you know it completely, very, very well, show me a 5. And then you can see just by the sea of hands what level of misunderstanding you're dealing with. So it's a great a fast way to gauge exactly where your class is at with your lesson. And then you'll know, is this something that you need to reteach, or is this something that the class can help fill in the gaps of misunderstanding or lack of understanding with the other student, and if it's, and if that there's that one student that just doesn't get it, my suggestion is to let everybody else go and engage in a group activity where they help each other anyway, okay? And then I usually take that student to the side and try to go give a more myopic view of what might be the situation with that one kid, but I don't do it in front of the group because, of course, we don't want to single them out, like I think Adrian and some of the others have already mentioned.
So there you have it, fellow teachers and lifelong learners. We have just shared with you some tips you can use how to monitor students' understanding effectively. If you have anything to share at all, any comment or suggestions or tips of your own, put it in the comment section and let us know what you guys think.
Don't forget, the English blog provides customized lesson plans, curriculum mapping and unit planning, life and career coaching sessions, and weekly vlog and blog content related to ESL education. Just send us a message at www.theenglishblog.com and be sure to subscribe to our website for exciting offers and updates.
Clearly, you have found us somewhere on social media already in order to be watching this video. We are on Facebook, where we premiere our vlogs live every Friday. You can find us at the English blog, that's what you search for, or the English blog for teachers if you're using the URL. You can also find us on Instagram at _English_blog, where we announce our vlogs and give you some nice quotes and tips about teaching. We're also on Twitter. You can follow us there at the English blog 1. We're also on LinkedIn if you're a busy professional, where we post links to our blogs and our vlogs and tips, and you can find all of us as well. You can find more vlogs on YouTube. We're uploading more and more every time. They're all on Facebook now, and then we're migrating to YouTube as well. That you should just search the English blog or type in our specific URL, and then if we get enough subscribers, we'll be able to change it. So please like, follow, share, and subscribe across all those platforms, any of those platforms, and wherever you are, check out our content.
And if you haven't done so yet, don't forget to like and share this particular video you're watching right now, and share it to your family and friends so that they can benefit also from the wealth of wisdom we have just shared with you today. Until next time, next episode, ladies and gentlemen, stay home, Stay healthy and happy, and keep learning. My name is Adrian.
I'm Christy.
I'm TJ.
And I'm Sarah.
We're the English Blog. Bye, everyone.
Bye.